Hey there, football fans. Parker Thune, along with Jesse Crittenden here on the OU Insider YouTube channel. Please hold for the satisfying crack of an Olipop can. There it is. Well, folks, this is Quick Slants. Those of you that are familiar with this series know what we bring you in this series, which is a quick, digestible 10 to 15 minute video on whatever the compelling storyline and or storylines is/are in the world of Sooner football. Obviously, today we have a newly released depth chart. We have the first midweek press conference of the football season from Brent Venables. So we have a lot to talk about. Jesse and I are here to break it all down. And Jesse, let's start with the big surprise on the depth chart, and that would be the co-starters at running back. If I told you there were co-starters at running back heading into fall camp, you and basically everybody else that pays any attention to OU football would have said, okay, well, it's Gavin Sawchuk and Javonte Barnes, right? 0 for 2. Marcus Major and walk-on Tawi Walker are listed as the co-starters for week 1 at the running back position for Oklahoma. What do you make of that?
That's where the analysis of the depth chart, that's where it starts. And I think it's one of those things where I honestly think there's a lot to unpack here, Parker, because I still hold, and I'm sure you do too, that by the end of the year, it's going to be Javonte and Gavin running that room. It's going to be those two at the top. However, this is pretty consistent with what we've seen over the last few weeks. I mean, Javonte Barnes missed a lot of the spring. Gavin Sawchuk suffered an injury early in camp. Jeff Lebby said a few weeks ago he's a big Marcus Major fan. Jeff Lebby said that there were going to be several guys that see carries on Saturday. All of this is consistent with that. And Brent Venables even said, sometimes the best ability is availability. And I think that's where it comes in Tawi Walker's case. So I think they genuinely like the veteran presence that Marcus Major brings that room. And I think with some of the injuries that Gavin and Javonte have had, I think Tawi Walker's been a steady presence. And there's no doubt that Tawi Walker can play. I just think even with all of that, it is still a little surprising that he's going to be one of the first guys on the field taking carries. And this is a legitimate chance for him to prove that maybe he's been overlooked this entire time.
And for me, where I stand on it is, it kind of goes back to what you were saying there, Jesse, too, which is that the outlook for the backfield on the whole doesn't really change based on the week 1 depth chart. The expectation is and will continue to be that Gavin Sawchuk and Javonte Barnes are dominating the touches throughout the season out of the backfield. But one of the things that we've talked about with this Arkansas State game, which is really the only game on the schedule not even worth previewing because we all know beyond a shadow of a doubt what the outcome is going to be, right? This is an opportunity for either Marcus Major or Tawi Walker, probably not both, but one or the other, to make a case for a greater percentage of the touches going forward. That's what this is. This is their proving ground against Arkansas State, a team that Oklahoma should be able to win the battle up front with pretty easily. Can one or both of these guys find the holes, produce a solid yards per carry average, and prove to Jeff Lebby and the offensive staff that they are worthy of an expanded role in the backfield in addition to Sawchuk and Barnes going forward? Now, as we look at the wide receiver room, I think you nailed it. I had Jalil Farouk, Drake Stoops, and Nick Anderson as your 3 starters. You had Farouk, Stoops, and Andrell Anthony. And it is Anthony that is the 3rd starter alongside Farouk and Stoops. So what does that say about the Michigan transfer and the progress he's made in the offseason since joining the program back in January?
Yeah, I think, even though he didn't see the field a ton at Michigan, he did show in his snaps that he's an explosive player. And as I've said for months, and I'm going to admit that I did go a little back and forth over the last couple of weeks about Nick Anderson and Andrell Anthony. I certainly did. But I said months ago that Andrell Anthony brings a angle to this offense that it really needs. With Marvin Mims gone, they need a downfield presence. That's really when the chips got down last year. It was throwing up to Marvin Mims and hope he comes down with it. Andrell Anthony provides that kind of angle in this offense. So I think, again, we're going to see a lot of wide receivers on the field. That's still, I mean, we're going to see a bunch of guys on the field. But Andrell Anthony, I think they like his consistency, and they like that he brings something very specific that this offense needs.
Okay, so let's shift our attention to the defensive side before we get to Brent Venables' press conference and some of the things that he had to say about the depth chart, about the season ahead. The defensive side of the ball, I would say there were no major surprises. If there were, if there was one starter that probably came as a surprise to some, and it probably didn't come as a surprise to those that had been following the updates and developments throughout fall camp, but for those that maybe approach fall camp a little bit more casually and are only just starting to tune in, seeing Justin Harrington on the depth chart on the first team at the cheetah position over a guy that was a freshman All-American last year at Indiana and Dasan McCullough, that probably took at least a few folks by surprise.
Yeah, definitely. But I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One, I mean, Parker, you were there on Monday night with player availability. Who came out to speak? It was both Dasan McCullough and Justin Harrington. I think that is, again, further evidence that both of those guys are going to see the field a lot. I think they're going to be moved around a lot. And the reality is, Justin Harrington, his path from today, compared to where he was a couple of years ago, that man has gone through, he's gone through incredible growth. He's had to prove it. He's had to earn everything he's gotten. And I think you and I have seen during fall camp that he's really stood out. He's a fifth-year senior. He has institutional knowledge, and he brings real skills and a real skill set to this defense. So it's a surprise in the sense that I thought Dasan McCullough would probably be the starter with Harrington getting a lot of snaps. But to me, Harrington being the starter shows that he's proved enough during fall camp to earn that spot.
So this, I think, is where we start to make the transition between depth chart analysis and some angles, slants, if you will, on Brent Venables' press conference earlier today. And when you look at that cornerback position opposite Woody Washington, we all knew Washington was going to be one of the starters. It wasn't quite as clear who would be the other starter. And really the battle that emerged throughout fall camp was a battle between Gentry Williams and Josiah Wagner. Now, what was interesting, I think, one of the interesting things that Venables said today was, although Gentry Williams is listed as the starter at that other cornerback position for now, Venables did state that that is a battle that's still ongoing, and he expects to play a variety of guys at that other cornerback position opposite Woody. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I asked Brent that question. I came into the press conference really wanting to know about that cornerback spot because I think you and I had, I think if we would have guessed a few weeks ago, I think we both said we thought Gentry Williams would get that spot. But as fall camp progressed, we saw Josiah Wagner really make a name for himself and really make a bid for that spot. And so I do think it was telling that, compared to everything else Brent Venables said about different position groups, that was the one that he immediately, I asked him, what did Gentry Williams do to win that spot, and how'd you see that battle come about? And the first thing he said was that battle's ongoing. It was almost like he came in with that, wanting to preface that Gentry Williams has done a lot. He's progressed a lot. He's earned that spot. But that spot, you mentioned Shai Wagner, Kendall Dolby, Makari Vickers. I think there's going to be a lot of guys see the field. And I think this is the overall point, which is, don't put so much stock into this depth or this week one depth chart that you think it is immovable. It is unchangeable. This is the way it's going to be. And I think cornerback is at the top of that list of positions that if Gentry Williams wants to keep that spot, he better produce on the field.
3 true freshmen have a spot of their own on the 2 deep. Jackson Arnold at quarterback, Peyton Bowen at safety, Caden Green at left tackle. Really no major surprises there. Green had been working with the first team at left tackle throughout the spring because of some of the injuries there. He cements a spot on the 2 deep at that left tackle position. Obviously, Arnold was going to be the backup quarterback, and Bowen was going to be the backup strong safety behind Billy Bowman. So no major shocks there, but I want to focus specifically on Bowen and the return game. He is listed as one of 3 guys that the Sooners intend to deploy as a kickoff returner. And Brent Venables was asked about Billy Bowman, his starting strong safety and starting kick returner, the guy that's listed first team at kick return, I suppose, and how much of a willingness Bowman has to return kicks after he suffered an injury on a return last year against TCU. And his answer was great. He said, "What do you mean his willingness? Billy begs to be a part of that." That said, we know what type of explosiveness and elusiveness Peyton Bowen has to offer. How long do you think it is before we see Bowen move into a more full-time role as the kick returner and potentially as a punt returner as well?
I think a matter of weeks. I mean, I really do. I mean, we saw what this kid did in high school as a punt returner, as a special teams player. I mean, it's a difference maker. And I think, again, special teams is one of those things that I think is really, really easy to overlook until it hurts, until either it hurts you or until you've got a guy or you've got a player on special teams that's a real difference maker. I think Peyton Bowen is that. And Parker, like you and I have talked about before, I think Peyton Bowen is too special, too good of a playmaker to not only pigeonhole him into one thing, or I think we've seen this coaching staff prove that they want to find ways to get him on the field. And while I think you and I would both agree that Peyton Bowen's going to see a lot of snaps at safety, he's going to see a lot of snaps on the defense. However, there is still that is still a loaded secondary group. There's a lot of players vying for spots at safety. I think special teams is easily a place you can put Peyton Bowen, give him an impact, let him have an impact. I think it's a matter of weeks before he is that full-time guy as a returner.
How surprising was it for you to hear Brent Venables say the words, "We all know Dylan's not going to be here next year"? Because it kind of tracks with everyone's assumptions about the future of the quarterback position at Oklahoma. But there was always that chance, however slight it might have been, that Dillon Gabriel would elect to return for a 6th year of collegiate eligibility in 2024. And that's where things start to get hairy in the quarterback room at Oklahoma. But Brent Venables, whether he intended to or not, pretty much shut the door on that possibility today.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty. I think it was one of those, if you blinked, you missed it kind of moments. It came late in the press conference. But yeah, I think there is this kind of interesting dynamic where, I mean, Dillon Gabriel wants to make it to the next level, obviously. But I think this coaching staff, I mean, Jeff Lebby said it on National Signing Day that Jackson Arnold is the future face of Oklahoma football. I think their plans, what they want to do is pretty clear. They want to roll into the SEC with Jackson Arnold under center. I think Dillon Gabriel wants to get to the NFL. I think in a lot of ways, that again brings the focus back to this year where you and I have agreed that unless something goes really wrong, Dillon Gabriel is the quarterback for this year. But I think it's going to be one of those things that it's almost mutually beneficial. Dillon Gabriel needs to play well now, try to boost his draft stock. And this team wants to start thinking about 2024, first year in the SEC, and getting Jackson Arnold ready for that spot.
Taking another look back at that depth chart for just a second, given some of the things we've heard Venables and the rest of the staff say about the strong performers throughout spring ball and obviously fall practices, were there any guys that you expected to be higher on the depth chart, or any guys that maybe didn't appear on the depth chart at all that came as a surprise to you?
That's a good question. I definitely thought, I mean, I thought the defensive line was really interesting. I think for one, just being that there were so many guys listed at those spots. I mean, there's 5 guys listed at defensive tackle, 4 at nose tackle, 5 at one of the defensive end spots. And I thought it was pretty telling that Rondell Bothroyd is the only player atop any of those 4 groups that there's not an "or" next to his name. The other 3 have co-starters, co-backups. So I don't know if that necessarily surprised me, but I think it's interesting in the sense that I don't know, Parker. I guess I would say that I don't know if Jonah Laulu being at the top of that was necessarily surprising. I don't think it was surprising. I think he's risen up that depth chart, but I doubt it was. If anything, it's confirming what we've seen over the last few weeks, is that he's really made an impact at that defensive tackle spot.
What do you think among the bulletin board material from Venables' presser earlier today? Anything else non-depth chart related that stood out?
Yeah, I think the main thing being that he came out and specifically said he's going to play a bigger role in the defense this year. That's the biggest thing. And I think it's funny because it's one of those things that I think that was maybe the criticism for him last year was he too focused on the defense and not focused on other areas. But Brent talked at length about all the offseason, what he did during the offseason, figuring out what went wrong, where can things improve. And his takeaway was, I need to be even more focused on the defense. And this comes just a day after Ted Roof said, well, yeah, I call the plays, but Brent can override anything he wants. So I do think that is going to be an interesting dynamic this year, even more interesting than it was last year, is can Brent Venables take an even bigger role in the defense, whether that's play calling or strategy, depth chart, getting guys in and off the field while still being the head coach and having a full picture of everything else that's going on.
Football is just 4 days away in Norman, Oklahoma. Sooners opening up with Arkansas State this Saturday at 11 a.m. Hey, there is loads of content coming your way, both on this channel and over at ouinsider.com. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. This is Quick Slants. I'm Parker Thune. He's Jesse Crittenden. We'll see you again soon.